Good evening, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to see us today. We have a very special guest, Pennsylvania State Treasurer Stacy Garrity. Madam Treasurer, it is wonderful to see you again. We were talking before we started. You were on in December before taking your oath of office, and a lot has happened since then. Can you just really quick explain what the treasurer does other than collecting, being the recipient of tax dollars that come in? What all of the responsibilities of the office?
Sure. First of all, thanks, Leo, my friend, for having me on again. And yes, it's been a whirlwind since January 19th. I always think about that day when I was sworn in, and just the honor of being able to represent the citizens of Pennsylvania and having my family and friends there despite COVID. It was very special. So the main thing that I am is a fiscal watchdog. Okay, so that's the top priority, and I'm always focused on saving the taxpayers' money. And so to that end, returning the $4 billion of unclaimed property, and that means 1 out of 10 Pennsylvanians have unclaimed property. 4 billion with a B, that's a lot of money. Also in that number, there are just under about 659 military decorations. So these could be things like Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, all kinds of campaign medals, dog tags. We've just returned 78 since I took office. And so of course you can't put a price tag on military decorations. Right. Those is near and dear to my heart. We're also doing some things on the transparency portal, which I know you will
yes.
very much appreciate. So we talked, I think, before about Ledger 5. So yes. Ledger 5 is the mysterious ledger where the money runs through that wasn't appropriated. So when we spend money that wasn't budgeted, and it's usually in DHS, and that's when they do the supplemental appropriation at the end of the year, it goes through Ledger 5. So we're just about ready. We're just a couple weeks shy of getting that as another tab on the transparency portal. And so folks will be able to see exactly where we're spending money that wasn't appropriated. So that's a good first step to shine a bright light on that process.
Yeah. So just to clarify that for anybody who's watching, what happens is the General Assembly will say, let's say that the General Assembly says that a particular program can have $10 million. As that program or agency goes through the course of the year, if it is something that is either federally or state mandated that it has to be paid for, it runs out of money, 10 months into the year, and bills have to get paid. That money runs through Ledger 5. And what you're talking about doing is making sure that as that is happening, almost as close to real time as we can, taxpayers are aware that, hey, this program went over their budget. Here's the kind of money that they're spending that hasn't been appropriated, right? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Leo, just to be clear, it's typically things that are related to, health and welfare and safety. So things like for the corrections folks, the police, nursing homes. So things that really have to be paid for. But the point of the matter is, okay, why are we overspending in those, in those areas every single year? So it'll be good to get some conversation around it to start with, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so then the other thing we're looking at is rural outreach. And sorry about that noise. So,
that's okay.
So we have, 48 out of 67 of our counties are rural, and sometimes those counties can be forgotten by Harrisburg. And so we want to make sure that we're spreading the word about all of our programs to all of our counties, both rural and urban. And being able to do a little bit more working telework, we'll be able to be geographically represented across the Commonwealth and not just, in Dauphin County and the Southeast. So I think that's really good. There's a lot of good things that have happened with some of our savings programs. So PA Able, so that is the program that allows people to save that have disabilities. And we just reached a milestone in Pennsylvania. So we reached a 50 million asset milestone. And right now there's legislation being pushed to raise that age. It's called the Able Age Adjustment Act, to raise the age of the onset of the disability from 26 to 46. That will allow folks with disabilities, including 1 million veterans, to be eligible to save for their disabilities. And what's great is it doesn't it doesn't hurt their federal entitlements like SSI.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point, because one of the things that a lot of people don't understand, and you are limited if you're somebody who is on like an SSI or something like that, you are limited to the amount of assets that you can hold before your monthly payment starts to go down. So it's good because it prevents people who don't necessarily need, those types of payments from accumulating assets at taxpayer expense. But at the same time, it makes it really hard for somebody to plan for like future emergencies, or even to get into planning for kind of things that they know are going to happen, like saving enough money for a funeral and things of that nature. So the fact that you're moving in the direction of, and have the ability for these accounts to be set up so people can be financially independent, or as financially independent as possible, it's really a good thing for everybody.
It really is. It allows you to spend money on everyday expenses, like going to your appointments and other things. For example, if you needed, a special type of vehicle, a scooter, things like that. So I think it's a really good program, and we have almost 5,000 Pennsylvanians that are benefiting from it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. The other thing, PA 529 had its best year ever in fiscal year 2021, which is fantastic when you consider, we were worried, will people, continue to save for their children's education through the pandemic, and it really wasn't reduced. They added over 25,000 new accounts, and the total assets are now more than $6.8 billion. So that's really great. There's over 260,000 accounts in total.
That's phenomenal.
It is. And I want to mention what sometimes people don't think about. It's college and career savings programs. So these are technical schools, apprenticeships, and when you travel around the state, you know this, Leo. What businesses say, we need skilled labor. So this is a perfect way to acquire a skill, a trade.
Yeah, because not all of those, it's either A, not exactly free to get into some of those programs, and B, if you are in one of those programs, you are earning at a reduced rate because you're an apprentice or whatever. So having the ability to free up some funds so that you can pick up, some of those high demand skills that really are just the positions are just sitting open for them, and being able to plan for that for your kids is a huge deal.
Yes, and this is a fun program that we just started. A little over a month ago. So it's a new social media campaign, and it's called Made in PA Mondays. And so what we do is we're trying to highlight just the amazing work manufacturers are doing across the Commonwealth, and we're trying to hit all 67 counties. So that's kind of fun.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So, those are all of the really good things that are happening. You do have some less fun things that you have to be a part of, including, some board positions. And some of those are getting a lot of attention, but just kind of generically, when we look at what the Treasurer's Office does as it relates to various boards and committees across the state, how is the Treasurer's Office involved in oversight, and what is the role, in those kind of situations?
Okay, so as treasurer, I serve on 16 boards and commissions. Okay, so basically that means, I have an ex officio role. So I have, basically one vote of, however many votes there are. And so obviously I can't personally serve. So on some of the boards I have designees, but I will tell you, my two favorites, I attend every single meeting, and that would be PSERS and PSERS, so our pension boards. And they take up, as you can imagine, quite a bit of time.
A lot of time.
PSERS right now, yes, about 40% of my time.
Yeah, and so I actually saw somebody posted a question about their Pennsylvania workers' compensation bill. I'm not sure if that's a board that you're on, but we've heard from a lot of people about their rates being adjusted and everything. And although I know you are involved with a lot of things, I don't think you're quite involved with the workers' comp stuff.
No. So I haven't seen those questions.
No, that's okay. It was on our on the Facebook chat. We have stuff that pops up, so I just try and keep an eye on it as we're going through. So when we're talking about PSERS and PSERS in particular, right? These are the two major pension boards. How much do they have currently in assets that they're in charge of?
Oh gosh, so PSERS is over 60 billion, and PSERS I believe is about 30 billion. So I mean, those aren't the exact numbers, but that's just roughly. But yeah. PSERS is the big one, and of course that's for the beneficiaries are the school teachers and the employees of the school. So over over 260,000 folks.
So we have close to we have a very large amount of money split between these two pension boards. The pension boards are really in charge of, I guess, final approval for how the money is going to be invested to create the return on investment. Does that sound about right?
Yes. So my job on these pension boards is to be a fiduciary. So that means that I look out for the beneficiaries of the plan. So my interest is in, the school teachers, the employees, but ultimately the taxpayers, because when they're underfunded, we foot the bill.
Right.
Through our property taxes.
Yeah, primarily through the property taxes, and then at some point the general fund is going to have to kick in for benefits that were promised and not adequately prepared for.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
So the treasurer's office has a seat on these boards. You have fiduciary responsibility, so that means that if there are investments that are recommended, you have a responsibility to look at those investments and say, this is either going to help us get to our goal of making sure that we have the money to pay out the benefits, or this investment is too risky, or fill in the blank, whatever the case may be. So it sounds like, and based on media accounts and everything, that the PSERS board in particular has had some issues with that oversight, where there are some questions as to whether or not that oversight was actually being conducted correctly. What's happened during the time that you have been on the PSERS board?
Okay, so keep in mind it's just 6 months, but
exactly, yes.
But it's been a long 6 months. So one of the main points is that the investment return at PSERS, so if you look at their 1, their 3, their 5, and their 10-year performance, they are in the very bottom quartile. And that should concern us all. So it's just been consistent underperformance. And obviously, if you worked in the private sector, you would not be able to have that consistent underperformance. So what sometimes gets lost in all the discussion is just the fact that the return. So to step back. So basically, what they did was they had a 9-year. Oh, I think we froze for a minute, Leo. There was a 9-year performance number in December that was voted on. Okay, and it was incorrect. Now, of course, that's before my time. But 3 members of the board, including Treasury, so the previous treasurer, voted, basically abstained. So they did not vote for it. And that's because the numbers were so close. They just got the information late the evening prior, and they wanted more time to analyze it. So, second, there were discrepancies between the PSERS CAFR and one of the investment consultants' quarterly performance, and that was brought to the attention to PSERS management in writing by Treasury last August. Okay. So we were saying, there's something doesn't look quite right with these numbers. Okay, then you fast forward, And yes, the number was wrong. So we had to vote to we had to vote for the correct number, which triggered shared risk. And so what that does is basically teachers that were hired after 2011, about 110,000 teachers will pay more money because shared risk was triggered by a very, very, very small amount. And so,
right. So because,
investigation.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say triggered the independent investigations, the DOJ, as well as an internal investigation.
So we have the reason that this is significant and why we actually had on the last show that we did, we had a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer who's been doing a fantastic job of covering things. So what ended up happening was this trigger, the numbers that were approved weren't approved, or the numbers that were used weren't some of the audited numbers. They used a different set of numbers to arrive at the conclusion. That conclusion ended up being off, as you mentioned, by a very small amount in terms of percentage, but that amount was enough to trigger this higher payment being required by people who are paying into the system in order to get the benefits that they're promised.
Correct. So we had to recertify the number. Nobody really wanted to, but we had to. It was our responsibility. The number was wrong, and it was just by just a few basis points. But they went back and double checked and triple checked, and yeah, the numbers were just shy. But the real issue is really not the error. The real issue is it was triggered because of the 9-year performance was that poor.
Right, and that does get lost. I mean, when you came in from the private sector, so when we're taking a look at if you or I or anybody who's watching this, we're watching their 401k or their IRA. One of the things that you look at is how do the mutual funds that you're in compare to the broader market, other funds that are kind of in the same category, and you try and figure out, okay, am I getting enough bang for my buck on this? And what's happened at PSERS and SERS also, but to a slightly lesser extent, is that those numbers, they actually get to decide who they're going to compare themselves to on a lot of the reporting that they do, which is bizarre. But they also have to, if they don't hit these targets, that means that you and I and everybody who's watching at some point are going to have to kick in more money in order to make sure that these payments are made. And the payments are, at this point, mandated constitutionally, unless the Pennsylvania Supreme Court completely changes directions on how they're interpreting interpreting statute, right?
That's correct. And so what we really want to look at is the asset allocation, because when you look at PSERS in particular, their percentage of alternatives is higher than if you look at the top 200 pension plans. So it's more than double actually. So these alternatives, basically you have a lot of money in the pipeline that you're paying management fees on, but it hasn't been deployed yet. And so you'd be better off if you would have let your money sit in the S&P 500.
Right. Yeah. In an index fund.
You would have done much better.
Yeah. So when we talk about alternative investments, this gets a little bit wonky. So what that means is, you have private asset managers. So this could be somebody like like BlackRock or some of these larger investment firms. What they do is they take a look at and they try and guess kind of ahead of time what the next big thing is going to be. So sometimes they're investing in startups, where shares aren't necessarily publicly traded. They could be investing in things like real estate, which is one of the things that PSERS has gotten involved with, is direct real estate investment, which is also questionable. But as these funds are being actively managed, you not only are, at this point, we're not only getting lower returns, we're also paying much higher fees than what you would be if you were doing something passive, like you said, like the S&P 500. Do you know offhand, like, what the difference is between, what we're currently getting versus if they had just done an index fund or something like that?
Oh gosh, well, if you look at just this past year, the return was only 1.11%. So you could have just parked your money in an index fund and done much better. And they're paying about $1 billion a year in carrying costs and interest. So it's something that has to be looked at for sure. And I think there's with Joe DiStefano and some of the other reporters, there's a lot more interest. People are becoming educated, asking questions. So I'm sure we'll get there.
So what would you like to see happen as it relates to PSERS and PSERS and some of these funds? If I know that you currently only have one vote, but if we made you kind of in charge of the boards for a day, and you could make some of these changes, what do you think would be something that would really have the best impact for taxpayers at this point?
I'm going to focus on PSERS because PSERS returns, there's quite a bit of difference. They've done a lot to reduce fees. Their asset allocation is not so heavily weighted in alternatives. So I think they're on the right track. They've done a lot of work. PSERS, I think that we could use a change in leadership and also need to reevaluate basically the asset allocation. And we need to focus on reducing some of, these illiquid investments and the high fees that we're paying.
Yeah, and it's interesting when we take a look at, you mention a change in leadership, and you are probably too polite to mention it, so I will. The gentleman who is currently running PSERS is a retired state legislator who got a pay increase by taking the job at PSERS and is getting now a higher pension, will be eligible for a higher pension as a result of that pay raise in moving into the PSERS position. So it's, from a outside perspective, it's very questionable as to whether or not someone who is a former legislator, really with no investment experience, particularly in managing such huge amounts of dollars, is really the best choice for a position like this. I know, just kind of looking at it from the outside, that's one of the things that has always concerned us when it comes to these golden parachute type appointments. And unfortunately, it really seems like some of those concerns are playing out as it relates to PSERS.
Yes,
I won't leave you on the hook on that one.
Well, the numbers speak for themselves, Leo. But I will say, the executive director, he's not the chief investment officer, so
right.
So you have to.
That is a fair point. It's a fair point. It's just very concerning. If there would have been another level of oversight beyond, in between the CIO and the board, it certainly would have been helpful. And I appreciate the fact, and I know that our audience appreciates the fact that we have someone who has private sector experience who is looking out for taxpayers as it relates to what's going on at PSERS and PSERS. And we get criticized at CAP for being unnecessarily partisan. So I would also like to say I appreciated the fact that when there was another opening on the PSERS board, you supported the nomination of the former treasurer, who did a fairly decent job, and he was a Democrat, and you beat him in the election. So the fact that you were willing to do that really speaks to the fact that you are looking out for taxpayers, kind of regardless of party affiliation. So I know seeing that just as an outside observer is certainly something that is nice to see, and it's kind of a rare thing this day and age. So,
well, honestly, it was a no-brainer. Joe Torsella did a great job on the board before I came. I'm enjoying serving with him, and we certainly vote the same way.
Yeah. Well, you have things to do. I appreciate that you took time out of your evening. I know that our audience also appreciates it. It's great having you on, and I will definitely try in the not too distant future. Maybe we can get you on for a end of year one kind of review. What the heck happened? I'd love to have you back again in the future.
I would love to do that. Thank you so much, Leo.
Absolutely. Everybody, thanks very much for tuning in. If you want to see the original interview we did with Treasurer Garrity, that's on our YouTube page. It's also available in our videos section on Facebook. You'll just have to scroll back. I think it was episode 5. So it's a while ago. Thanks very much again, Stacy. We really loved having you on.
Thanks. It was great being on. Have a great evening, Leo.
You too.